I decided a long time ago, in reference to that there's something in the European coding that makes us want to be leading the charge with and shooting all the arrows when we really need to be back flint napping and learning how to make the arrowheads,
right.
It's just something I've always been interested in since I was a tiny little kid, and like many people, I think I became interested in it in the Boy Scouts initially, and now there's information in this book about how that actually came about through some of the as a matter of fact, the first medical Indian doctor, Charles Eastman, was very much responsible for all that Indian lore. But that, and again, there's a source behind that. The Boy Scouts were born from two different inspirations. First, the Buffalo Bill thing. All the little scarves and the necklaces and so forth, they're very, and the short breeches almost mimic the thigh-high boots and everything. But Charles Eastman had very much of a serious impact on the Indian lore in the Boy Scout manuals and so forth. But it came during a time, that was about 10, 15 years after the Wounded Knee Massacre, at which time the dominant culture in America at that point viewed the Indian culture as pacified, if you will. So then, once the Indian, the threat, the militant threat, let's say, was diminished, then it was safe to romanticize the Indian. You see. So, and also it came about at a time when the Gilded Age was at its peak in America, and materialism was just rampant, and a lot of the culture was being informed by people who were for the first time seeing that we were losing touch with this side of us that was in touch with the earth. And so the Boy Scouts was a way to remedy that, to get young men back out into the outdoors and learn how to make a fire in the woods and stuff like that. So those things coincided. And in me, to answer your question, I think that I was very much impacted by that as a child. But my ballads, and people... I always get introduced that I write books and I do this and I do that and I do this, but essentially, I spent about 6 years in the record business, and I saw very quickly that I didn't like the record business. That the record business to me was designed for unscrupulous old men to take advantage of idealistic kids, and yet it had some principles that worked.
Now, when you came up with those philosophies that you had, that was 73?
73 was when I was done with it.
Okay.
When I left RCA Records, I was done with it. And what I did was I went into the theater because it was the only place that I could take what I had written where it would work. And people say, well, you do this and you do that and you do this and you do that. But it's all been related to one thing, and that's this quest, this following this path, and that's a phrase that bothers me. Following your path, a path is something you turn around and look at because you've been walking on it. You know what I mean?
Right.
It's like you make that path as you go. It's not something that you follow.
Right.
It's something that you create.
Surely.
And so I haven't been following my bliss, I've been creating my bliss, is what I'm saying. And to me that meant, okay, now you're in the theater, this guy says, you got to do this Indian thing, and I'm going, well, I'm concerned about appropriation, I don't think a white guy should be singing. He said, so you don't think an Indian could play Hamlet? And I said, well...
Put it that way.
Yeah. I think an Indian should play Hamlet,
Mm-hmm.
an American Indian. You see, so then the next thing I know, I'm performing this Indian piece, and it works. So I'm doing it in conjunction with all the other things. But what happened with me was I created my own niche, and it's a very narrow niche, but I've had to do all these other things. And the next thing I know, I'm at the Eugene O'Neill, because I'm working on Black Elk Speaks with a production team to try to get a play up of it in the late 70s. And they like my one-man show and want to develop the Mountain Man show into a full musical. So I'm a playwright suddenly. You see. So the things, if you are creating your path, the things you need then come to you. You have
Mm-hmm.
to have them to stay on that, or it's not a path. You're going to run into a wall and it won't happen anymore. So, yeah, that's what happened. One step leads to another, and you learn to write songs. Then, to me, the songs... The formula for writing songs in Nashville was, when I started out, was 2-3 minute songs, and when they asked me, "You got songs? What are your songs about?" And I said, "Well, I've got one that's 30 minutes long," and they were about 30 minutes long. And this guy said, "What? We can't get that on the radio."
Thank you. Good talking to you.
So, but in the theater,
You could do it.
it worked. You
Absolutely.
see, so that path didn't work. That one opened up, and there you go.
Fantastic.
And so that's all led to this book, and I'm still 45, nearly 50 years later, still doing it. So, but it's all related to the same thing. I've got 4 books out, and all but one of them have the West in the title.
Mm-hmm.
So that says something right there.
Mm-hmm.
You see, the West is our national story, and I've been interested in our national story since I was a kid. And when I came home with these songs the first time, my dad said, "I wondered where in the world all that Indian stuff came from," and yet I have spent half my life living with Indian people. So.
Sure. Bobby Bridger, live in the KPFT studio. The new book, Where the Tall Grass Grows. You can pick it up tomorrow night at Brazos Books on Bissonnet at 7 o'clock. You'll be out there signing books.
Mm-hmm.
Can we talk you out of one more song?
Sure.